Hello, everyone. Welcome to Living One. I'm your host, Olivia Crossman. Living One is Kerulos's monthly webinar series, now in its 5th year. With guest speakers from around the world, we listen in to how people are bringing their ethics, minds, and lives into alignment with nature for earth and animal liberation and revitalization. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? This year, in collaboration with the Plant Initiative, we start off with a special series, Plant Voices, Guides to Understanding Nonviolent Living. Today, and through the month of May, we hear 5 speakers reflect on what plants can teach us about nonviolent living, how plant sentience affects and informs plant-based living, and ways to model and maintain nature nonviolence as plant-based consumers. Today, we have the 4th session in this series. Our guest today is Dr. Will Tuttle. Dr. Tuttle is the author of the international bestseller, The World Peace Diet, published in 18 languages, and the 2024 Food for Freedom, Reclaiming Our Health and Rescuing Our World. A recipient of the Courage of Conscience Award and the Empty Cages Prize, he is also the author of several other books on spirituality, intuition, and social justice, as well as the creator of online wellness and advocacy programs. A vegan since 1980 and former Zen monk, he's featured in a number of documentary films. The co-founder of the Worldwide Prayer Circle for Animals, he is a frequent radio, television, and online presenter. With his spouse, Madeleine, a Swiss visionary artist, he has delivered thousands of lectures in all 50 states and in 50 countries. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various different Indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Kerulos Center for Nonviolence, it's my dog joining us. The Kerulos Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, takelma, daku betete, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. Dr. Tuttle will be speaking for about 45 minutes, after which we will have 15 minutes for question and answer. Please keep your microphone muted to avoid any unintended interruptions. And if you have any questions for Dr. Tuttle, type them out in the chat and we will read them out after the presentation. Finally, we ask that all of us participate with full respect and attention to each other in the spirit of peace and wisdom that Living One seeks to foster. So without further ado, we welcome Will Tuttle.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Thank you, Gay, and everyone at Kerulos Center. It's great to be with you. And I would love to go ahead and just jump right in, and we'll have as she said, we'll have the Q&A afterwards. So the underlying idea here, from my point of view, in terms of living in harmony with nature, with the plants and with the animals, is what is referred to by the English word veganism or vegan living, which is, to me, an iteration of another word, which I think is maybe more on target, which is the old Sanskrit word ahimsa, which means nonviolence. So nonviolence is really the living core, I think, of all the world religious traditions. And it calls us to live our lives as best we can to minimize the harm and suffering that would cause to other expressions of life. So we have this word vegan, which we also have this word veganic, which refers to agriculture or farming that does not use animal inputs like bone meal, blood meal, manure, and so forth. So it's gardening and growing food without dominating and exploiting animals as much as possible. And so I think there's a little bit of a problem with the word vegan in the sense that it's somewhat divisive, I think, in a lot of ways. People think, oh, I'm a vegan, I'm different than everybody else, or I'm not a vegan, I'm different. I mean, we have this sort of identity thing. And so I use the word mainly as an expression of ahimsa, or the idea of liberating animals, to just do the best we can to liberate animals. And by animals, I mean all of us, human animals, other animals, and not as a way of dividing, because it's really important, I think, to see, from my point of view anyway, that what we call vegan living is really a natural, inherent part of our humanness, to do the best we can to live our lives without harming others unnecessarily. I think that's a natural tendency that we all have inborn. We have a natural empathy. We've all suffered. We don't like to cause suffering to others unnecessarily. And as we grow, I think, spiritually, we begin to realize that we're raised in a society that is devastating, really, in its wounding of us as human beings, to have us be compelled from the time we're little infants to eat the flesh and secretions of horribly abused animals as if it's a routine, normal thing to do. And we learn to put up a curtain between ourselves and reality in many ways. I did that for the first 22 years of my life. And I ate the usual meals like everybody else. And I remember going away to a summer camp in Vermont when I was a kid and having my axe and cutting off the heads of chickens, because that's what you have to do. If you're, 13, 14 years old, I wanted to show that I understood that a boy can be a man and can do man's work. And I knew, because at that point I'd gone through 13 years of the most intense indoctrination a human being can go through. 3 times a day I was eating. Food meals are really rituals that we do, the most profound rituals. So I was eating this ritualized teaching that God gave us certain animals to eat. They don't have a soul. They taste good. If you don't eat them, you're definitely going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. So we've just got to kill these animals. And I would also we would gather around a dairy cow, and I would participate in killing the cow every year, which was a much more of an ordeal because it was a much larger animal. And so I saw the suffering and all of that involved, but I couldn't really question it, because it was pervasive and normalized completely and natural. We thought it was just a natural thing to do. And it was only because I was exposed to a community of people. It was the farm in Tennessee. Years later, quite a few years later, 1975, right after college, I decided to go on a spiritual pilgrimage with my younger brother, Ed. And we decided we would walk all the way from Concord, Massachusetts to California. And we would have no money, and we would just meditate, and we would attain enlightenment. If we didn't attain enlightenment on the way, we were sure that if we got to San Francisco, we would definitely attain enlightenment. So we worked our way west, and we got as far as Buffalo, New York, and eventually we walked south. So we just walked, again, with no money, just meditating, and somehow staying in churches or in woods or in people's houses or in hippie communes. Actually, they were hippie communes back then. And in Tennessee, we made it to the largest hippie commune in the world, the farm, with Ina May and Stephen Gaskin. And I remember finding myself in this community that was totally vegetarian. There was no meat, dairy, or eggs. So they were actually vegan, no honey. And even some of them didn't wear leather. So there was this whole idea of trying to live in harmony with animals. And they were doing it mainly to reduce hunger in the world, because animal agriculture, as I'm sure you're all aware, is very inefficient use of resources. We grow huge amounts of corn and soy. We cut down forests. We grow and really it's an environmental nightmare to grow all these genetically engineered plants, corn and soy and alfalfa, to feed to animals, while people are starving because we feed most of it to these animals. So the whole idea was to reduce our environmental footprint by eating lower on the food chain so that we don't need so much land and water and petroleum. And so when they explained that to me, I said, great, that's a good idea. And they also explained to me the hideous routine mutilation and violence toward these animals as well, millions of animals every day. And it was kind of like this curtain, getting pulled away, and I could see what's really going on, kind of like in The Wizard of Oz. And now you understand what's really happening and why we have so many wars and violence in our society. It's really this war against nature and animals that was initiated, I believe, 10,000 years ago with the beginning of animal agriculture, when we started to look at cows. Well, first it was sheep. Wild sheep became my sheep. We started owning them in what is today Iraq, northern or by Syria, and then wild goats, and then about 2,000 years later, wild cows and other animals. So this whole revolution that took place and spread northern Mediterranean to Central Asia to Europe, and then spread from Europe throughout the whole planet. When people came here from Europe, they brought with them what the Indians referred to as their slave animals. And that was like, what the heck is this? But that was normalized again by that point. And so the enslavement of animals leads directly to the enslavement of each other. And that's what my new book is. It kind of goes into that more in depth. But the whole idea is, if we want freedom and sustainability and abundance and justice and equality and harmony and peace, then we owe it to give that to animals, right? I mean, the whole idea is, whatever we sow, we're going to reap. I used to teach college courses in comparative religion, and I really love that, because if you look at the world religions, they all agree essentially on the main points. The golden rule is in all of religions: don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. And we include animals in that because they're sentient beings. If you have a companion dog or a cat, you know that's true. So the problem is, we're all wounded terribly by being born into a culture where we buy and sell every day millions of fully sentient beings, cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese and fishes and these animals by the pound, just as if they're sacks of cement. So this injects into all of us a mentality not only of domination and exploitation of the weak by the strong, which basically undermines any opportunity or possibility that we could ever have to have a society of justice. When we're eating injustice every day, we're causing it and we're eating it. And the domination of the sacred feminine, because animal agriculture is really not just about humans dominating animals, it's about men dominating female animals, because it's really the female animals that are the most abused, and it's their reproductive organs, and it's the little babies that they give birth to that are stolen and killed and mutilated. So it's a very unfortunate thing. I think 10,000 years ago, when our forefathers crossed that line and started to sexually abuse and impregnate against their will these animals, that line we have not recovered. I mean, and it set a trajectory for the society, and that society, that violent, warlike, patriarchal culture, started to dominate and destroy the other cultures around it that were more plant-based, basically, and became the world that we live in now, right? With weapons and technology, science. Science is all based on animal agriculture. It's about predicting and controlling and dominating and exploiting nature. That's the purpose of it. And so this underlying template of animal agriculture it has insinuated itself into every institution in our society, into our language, into our thoughts, into every aspect. And we don't realize how pervasive it is and how it justifies and legitimizes our violence and exploitation of animals and of each other. And so the path forward for us, which I think is absolutely available, is to understand this, just to understand it. And then once we understand it, we can begin to heal it within ourselves, and then begin to do what we're doing now, which is to create communities of liberation, communities of sanity, communities of respect and kindness and justice for other expressions of life. So this, I think, is the challenge that we face. We're born here, and we're all wounded, and we're eating animal foods, and we're not just eating animal foods, but we've adopted the mentality of materialism, which is required by animal agriculture. Philosophical materialism is absolutely demanded. And so today we live in, I think, after 10,000 years of marinating in animal agriculture, we have the most materialistic society in the history of the world. And I use that word basically to denote a mentality that only recognizes matter as real, right? What you can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, that's all that's real. Consciousness, that's just an epiphenomenon of the brain, which is a material thing. And we have this idea of a Big Bang and sort of random mutation and there's meaninglessness. And I mean, it's a philosophy for slaves. It's a philosophy created by a slave-creating society that enslaves animals and enslaves each other and dominates the fundamental sacred wisdom of the feminine dimension at its core. And so it's about healing this wound within our own psyches, and then also, I think, awakening out of the materialistic trance that pervades our world completely. And so looking into ancient wisdom traditions is a great thing, because people in ancient traditions, they were not mesmerized by materialism to the degree that we are. So I ended up eventually becoming a vegan in 1980. I became a vegetarian in 1975 at the farm, because there was 900 people living at the farm. They were all vegetarians. And so it was the example of this community that opened the door to me to just walk out of that prison of eating meat. And then about 5 years later, I was living in a Tibetan Buddhist meditation center in San Francisco. I got out to San Francisco eventually, and I lived in Zen centers in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I became a vegan in 1980. So that just meant that I gave up the dairy and eggs and leather, and just try to make it pervasive in my life to try to minimize the violence that I was causing to other expressions of life. And then a few years later, I became a Zen Buddhist monk, and I was living in South Korea. I shaved my head, and we were meditating for 12 to 14 hours a day from 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd get up about 2:30 and meditate till 9 o'clock at night. So there was a whole emphasis was placed on inner silence and tuning into the deeper wisdom that resides within our own true nature. But this was a community that had been practicing vegan living for 750 years, right? And for 750 years, since the 1200s, no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather, no killing of mosquitoes. I mean, the whole idea was to try to live our lives with respect for other expressions of life. Because if you're doing that much meditation, then you become sensitive to the reverberations of our actions, of our thoughts and words and deeds. And we realize that if I put out violence and harm, then it comes back. That's what I was saying earlier. The core of every religion is the golden rule, which is not to do to others what we wouldn't want to have done to ourselves. And the corollary of that is whatever you sow, so shall you reap. The idea of cause and effect, or of karma, whatever you do, it does come back. So this is for me anyway, this was the experience of being a Zen Buddhist monk and having these ideas go deeper that helped, I think, for me to eventually write this book, The World Peace Diet, and now this new book, Food for Freedom. And the World Peace Diet became a worldwide bestseller in 2010, translated into many languages, so we could travel all over the world and meet people all over the world, all over Asia and Africa and the Middle East and Europe and South America and everywhere, and see people creating sanctuaries for animals and having veganic gardens and trying to live in a way that's more harmonious with nature. And it's been extremely gratifying to see that there are people doing this, that are people waking up and making an effort and trying to educate and spread this message. But I think the theme of this particular Living One series is also about living in harmony with plants as well as animals, because one of the underlying ideas, I think, is we live in harmony if we can live in harmony with the animals, that would be great, but there's more to this planet than just animals. There's the whole plant kingdom. And, are we harming plants? How can we live our lives to minimize our harm to other living beings? I think that's really a very interesting question. And so for 17 years, I met my wife Madeleine in Switzerland. I was living in a 1971 Volkswagen bus at that time. And I did that for 3 years. I taught college for about 5 or 6 years before that in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then we spent a few years in Northern California creating CDs. I met her in Switzerland. She's an artist. And so we came together as two vegans, and we wanted to spread beauty into the world through art and music. And we ended up getting an RV, a fifth wheel trailer with a pickup truck. So we just lived in this kind of like a tiny house on wheels, about 200 square feet, for 17 years. And we did that all over the United States. So we couldn't grow food ourselves. I mean, we could grow sprouts. So I always grew sprouts on the counter. But after those 17 years, we were kind of looking always with an eye to where we might like to maybe get a little piece of land or something, or a house. And we ended up here in Northern California. So now we have a food forest. We have about a half an acre of land, and we have a little food forest. And so we grow food here. And so I have experience now for the last about 12 years, I think, 12 years, yeah. We moved here in 2012. And of working in harmony with plants to grow food, and also to experience traveling around the world, how people do this in other countries as well. So it's a huge amount of information, really, that I've been gathering over the years about this. And the main point I want to make, I guess, is that the materialism of our society is really devastating, and it kind of dumbs us down and makes us not understand our true nature. Our true nature, from my point of view, is infinite and eternal consciousness. And we manifest for a few short decades through this vehicle, which is waving at you right now. And we kind of identify with this physical body, like that's me. No, it's like if you're walking on a beach and you see a footprint in the sand, you don't go up to the footprint and go, "Hello, George, how are you doing?" You know that's a footprint. This is a footprint waving, right? You can't see the being. We don't see the being. We are that. We are the being. And the same thing is true of cows and pigs and chickens and all these other beings. There's much more. And we are in materialism. We're lost in delusion and deception. So it's really important to do the inner work, I think, to kind of begin to really understand this, not just intellectually, but on a deeper level. And when that happens, then we begin to have, I think, a natural respect for not only for the animals, but for plants, for everything. And the underlying idea really is that now, since we live in a culture that's based on animal agriculture, which is based on domination and exploitation, and maximizing return through using technology, we do plant agriculture the same way we do animal agriculture, right? We do monocropping. We use pesticide, herbicides, fungicides. We use genetic engineering. We do all this violence towards plants, just like we do towards animals. And we have a system of centralization. Everything is centralized, and centralization of money, of power, of information, of food. And this is anti-democratic. It's anti-life. It's how a few control many. You have 4 or 5 guys, they can control and dominate 5,000 chickens in a warehouse, right? You have a few men with gigantic tractors, and they can dominate, 100 acres of corn or whatever. It's this using technology to centralize and dominate and exploit and extract for money and creating disease, because disease is profitable. You want to maximize disease. You want to maximize pollution. Pollution is profitable. The more polluted it is, the more sick people are, the more money we make. It's all one industry. There's only one industry, the chemical, I call it the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex, right? It's all one system, and it maximizes wealth in the hands of a tiny elite. 1/10,000th of 1% of the human population controls the money and the power and the information and the educational system of everything. So you got to understand that. So this system has evolved to maximize power and control in the hands of a few, and it's based on materialism. And it's based on concentrating power and wealth in the hands of a few and doing plant agriculture the way we do animal agriculture. So the antithesis of that, the healing of that, right? The healing is to evolve or maybe to return, even better way to look at it, to return to our original wisdom, to see beings when we see beings, rather than seeing commodities that we sell by the pound, to see ecosystems that, not just ecosystems, but to see communities of beings and learn to respect them and give love. The whole thing is, the main input into plant agriculture should be love. There's no such thing as animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is just slavery. It's just exploitation and abuse. And but if we look back, in the early days of agriculture, of farming, it was basically mainly women's work. Men and women together, but it was always about working in harmony with nature, in harmony with the natural rhythms of nature, and in harmony with the basic truth of abundance. You plant one seed and you get 1,000 seeds. And the tree gives forth apples, and the apple tree doesn't say, those are 10 cents each or whatever. They just come, and we spread their seeds, right? We help them. So there's this whole idea of giving and harmony and abundance and celebration and being blessed by the benevolent universe. And this is how our food could be created or co-created. And then the other type of agriculture, like if someone says, I'm a farmer, you have to say, well, what kind of farmer? Are you a plant farmer or animal farmer? Because if it's animal farming, it's the exact opposite. The animals are always resisting. They don't want to be confined. They don't want to have their babies stolen. They don't want to have their purposes stolen. They don't want to have their milk and eggs and meat and life and everything stolen. It's just we just steal everything from them. And so they're always resisting. So the only way it works is if you just overpower them with superior force, technologically and physically. And that's what we do. We have a garden here. I remember at the very beginning, we just planted some trees, and then lo and behold, the deer came and stripped all the leaves off the trees. So we built a little fence out of nylon. It was high. It was 8 feet high. And one day a deer managed to get in somehow, and through one of the gates, I guess. And then she realized she was inside this fenced area. And even though no deer had ever come in through the gate, through the fence, but when she realized she was trapped, she tore the fence down. She just smashed through it. And it was such a great demonstration that the absolute worst thing you can do to a free living animal is to confine their body. That's just, they can't stand it. I mean, if that happened, if they put a foot into a trap, they'll bite their own foot off to get free. Freedom is freedom physically, to move, to run around, and to live. And so we confine these animals, these cows and pigs and chickens. And the problem is that we don't, if they were free living, it would be very difficult to do that. They'd always be banging them, they'd always be trying to get out. But what we do is we have them born into slavery. They're born right into slavery, so they don't even know anything else. That's what's happened to us too. We've been born into slavery, and we don't know anything else. So we think it's totally fine to have chickens and steal their eggs, and to have cows and steal their milk and steal their lives and steal everything, because we don't know anything else. And we do plant agriculture the same way. So the whole idea is we need to go on a spiritual resurrection, a resurrection of the sacred feminine dimension of consciousness, of love and nurturing and protecting life, and to find a new way of living. We have a friend in Maui who bought some land, and he planted a breadfruit tree. And he's been living there for quite a few years. And so when we saw him, we talked for a while, and he said, this body you see right here, my body, I'd say over half, probably 60% of this body is that breadfruit tree right there. And he told us, how he planted this tree, and he just gave this tree love. He just loved this tree, and the tree just grew. And the more he loved it and cared for it and watered it, the bigger the tree got. And the tree just gives a huge amount of breadfruits. And we saw this tree. It was gigantic, and it had so many breadfruits. And breadfruits are like potatoes. They're starved. You have to cook them. And so he said every day he eats breadfruit. Every day he steams it or fries it or bakes it or boils it or does something. And he said normally a breadfruit tree has a season and only gives breadfruits half the year. He said this one gives breadfruit like 10 months out of the year. It's full. And to me, it was a beautiful example of how we can live. That we can, if we really pour our love into nature, into the natural world, it pours it back. It gives. It's not an it. I mean, it's life itself giving, and we've lost track of that. I mean, we've had that stolen from us, that awareness. So when we moved here, I had this idea of doing a quick little, see if I can do a screen share. Can I do a screen share? Yeah. I'll just maybe show a few pictures of our food forest. It might be interesting. So here we go. Let's see if I can do this. So I'm sharing my screen, And you'll see here basically a few things. So this was the piece of land kind of when we moved on. It was just steep and rocky. There was no soil. It was just nothing there, really, except for a few manzanita trees and toyon trees. And then we brought a friend help us to make some terraces because it was so steep with rocks, and we moved a lot of rocks by hand. And then we started planting, and we planted and planted and planted, and that's my wife Madeleine, and all kinds of fruit trees and vegetables and things. So I'll just kind of go through here, but you can see gradually with planting, it's like love. You put it out, you love the earth, and you try to do your best to create an ecosystem that's in harmony, and it gives back with fruits and vegetables and squashes, and they climb up into the trees. It's so cute. I have to climb up way up into the trees. It's like at Christmas time, you got all these baubles hanging up, all these pumpkins and squashes. And then when you make a sign, this is called the Karuna Food Forest. And so here it is. We got a better fence eventually, and the trees grow. And so now there's shade. And then we started building raised beds for vegetables. We now have 6 of those, and it just gets better and better. The more we put into it, the more the flowers and the greens, come. This is a painting by Madeleine. I call it, it's the abundance of the harvest. And when we see these beautiful products, the tomatoes and pears and watermelons and things, they're delicious and they're nutritious, and all the nutrients that we need to thrive are in these foods. I've been a vegan for 44 years. Here I am, in my 70s. I haven't been to a doctor in 50 years. I'm healthy. But when we see this, we don't start salivating, right? That's not natural to start thinking, oh, I can't wait to bite into her. It's completely unnatural. So, but when we see this kind of beauty, we can create beauty and eat beauty. That's the thing. And agriculture is nothing but violence. Look at the beauty of what is available to us. These plums and figs, and look at all these persimmons. Like from one tree, we got all these persimmons and walnuts and pears and all kinds of things. Grapes come through, and then we always try to have some flowers, because I think you got to have flowers out there too. Madeleine's a wonderful gardener, and so this is just a few. These are the California poppies when they're in bloom, and that's we have borage, which Madeleine makes borage tea and compost tea every day. She's serving tea to the flowers. We put in some water, a little pond. So there's always water flowing, and then we have peaches and nectarines and plums and lemons and grapefruits, and then we have a nice little swing. Madeleine sits out there and listens to the plants and sees if anybody needs some water or whatever. This is another. Then we expanded it out to what we call the grove, and we have pear and apple and peach trees out here. And then, of course, we have herbs, lots of different herbs. And it's a whole ecosystem, really. And we have a wonderful healing space. I think that's the idea, is we can create these healing spaces wherever we are, and the food becomes medicine. That's another important point. We have almonds. We have a wonderful almond tree, tomatoes and raspberries and olives, all these wonderful olives. And, so it becomes this beautiful dance that we can learn to do. The cherries are just coming out, and we can even sell some of these at the local farmers market. It's so fun. Now I'm making money. So we're a farmer. So we're not. But, and the yellow cherry, these golden cherries, that's the morning smoothie. So that's basically it. We feel really so blessed by the land and by understanding this. And I think when you look into the eyes of these, this is another one of Madeleine's paintings called "We Are All Friends." we can be friends with these beings. They yearn for us to awaken out of the cultural trance of stabbing them for nutrients. We don't need to. I mean, and we can look and see, this is a cow that was rescued in Massachusetts. Her name was Emily. And Madeleine did a painting of her. But she jumped over a fence at a slaughterhouse and ran with a deer for a few weeks before she was rescued by a sanctuary. But I think when we begin to look more deeply, we can see these beings as beings, and we can see that we have another way of living on this earth and in harmony with the earth, that these are all beings that yearn to have their lives respected. And everything is interconnected. The main point is everything's interconnected. So these are just a few of Madeleine's paintings I just thought I'd show before I wrap it up here. This is called Looking Beyond. The giraffe has the largest heart and the highest perspective. So we really try to emulate the giraffe in all of our relationships if we can. And the elephants, who are so wise, and the bison. And these animals created harmony by the way they interacted with, they always do, with nature. And we can learn so much from them. So I'll wrap up the slideshow here, but thank you, Madeleine, for these beautiful paintings, and I'll stop it here. So, I love this one of the koala. She's hanging onto the earth for dear life. I think, really, we're hanging onto the earth for dear life, and they are too. We need to awaken out of this delusion of domination and exploitation of animals if we're going to be able to have a world that's healthy to leave to our children. I think that's the important thing. So sometimes people will say, well, don't you think that if you're a vegan, you're causing suffering to plants? Isn't that a thing? And I think it's a valid question. It's a valid question. However, there's a few things we need to emphasize. One is, of course, like you could just see, most of the foods that we actually eat are fruits, in the sense that we have all these different beautiful fruits that we call fruits. We have fruit vegetables, like most of the vegetables we're growing, peppers and tomatoes and squashes and cucumbers. These are all eggplants. These are all fruits. The plant, we just love the plant, and the plant gives us these, and we eat the seeds and we spread the seeds. So the plants make their fruits brightly colored and delicious, partly to encourage us to eat them and spread their seeds. So we're working in alliance with these plant beings, and we eat quite a lot of leaves, but again, the leaves are also given off, and we cut some leaves, then more leaves come. So I think the way to do it is to just deepen our sense of harmony and gratitude for the expression of life that they are, and understand that there's a giving that takes place. And I think one of the things that we've lost touch with in our society is that when we garden or farm, our energy and our being is actually intelligently connected with by the plants. This is something I think, the ancient wisdom traditions, if you ever read the books by Vladimir Megre, the Anastasia series, have you heard of that? I'm not sure if you've heard of Anastasia or Anastasia. She's a woman who lived in Russia, or maybe still living there. And there's a whole series of 9 books, actually 10 books, about her teaching, but she teaches some of the ancient ways of the people of Russia, going back to India, of putting a seed in your mouth so that the seed has your information on it and is growing. But like as we grow our food, we're giving to it all the time. Madeleine's out there watering with the compost tea that she makes from the borage. All of our compost goes back into the garden. It's called liquid gold. If you can buy a book called Liquid Gold, which is basically human urine. That's really fantastic fertilizer. Of course, it's rich in nitrogen. And in many countries, especially in Scandinavia, like in Sweden, when they have an apartment complex or something, they always divide the human excrement into the urine and feces, and all the urine is mixed with water and goes out onto the fields. I mean, that's so stupid to waste it. I mean, to just It's fantastic. So we've been doing that for years, and we mix it. We have a special thing that mixes it with water and dilutes it about 10-1, and then we every 2 or 3 days we spray it out on the plants, and it really smells good. It smells like a farm, and it's not only nitrogen. That's the point I want to make. It's not only nitrogen and other beneficial nutrients for the soil and for the plants and for the leaves so they can build themselves. It's also information. It's us. It's our energy. And as the years go by, we feel it. We more and more get in alignment and attunement with these plants. And what Anastasia says in the ancient wisdom traditions, the way people used to live, you would never eat somebody else's food out of their garden. That would be like having sex with somebody else's wife or husband or something. You'd be like, no, you grow your food and you have a relationship with the plants, and you love them and they love you back. And it just builds. That's really, I think, something to contemplate and something that we can strive for. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that here. And it's miraculous how amazing. Like our little nectarine tree last year gave us about 700 nectarines. I mean, incredible numbers of nectar. And our fig tree gives figs 3 times. We have a harvest like in June, and then another harvest in August, and another, or July, another harvest in September. I mean, they just, and that tree should be dead. I mean, the tree was completely just ringed by some squirrels. They ate the bark all the way around. And I talked to a tree expert, and he said, no, that's going to kill the tree. I put a Band-Aid on it and gave love, and that tree just gives up. It took a few years to recover, and now it's giving more figs than ever. So I think we have to, again, get beyond the materialistic perspective that has been forced on us growing up in this society, and connect with the fact that what we are is consciousness, plants are consciousness, animals are consciousness, and to raise our awareness so that we're creating ecosystems that are a space of love. And we can do that individually, and then when we do it collectively, we begin to raise our whole society to a higher level. Madeleine, are you available for a second?
Yes.
I think Madeleine is here, and I know I'm pretty much at the 45-minute mark here, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But she just came in from the garden, so
Hi.
that's Gay waving right there on the.
Oh, hello.
And so Madeleine is the artist. You just saw some of her paintings, and she's the gardener extraordinaire. I mean, I help out and dig holes and do things, and we do it together. But she's really so devoted to gardening and to that beautiful connection that we can have with plants, to love them and nurture them. And the more we do that, the more it comes back to us. And this is something I think that we could really understand, that we could feed everyone on this planet on a fraction of the land. The way back is through local agriculture, local small-scale farmers markets and agriculture. We can grow huge. I mean, there's people with a suburban lot, only maybe an eighth of an acre, who are getting 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of vegetables and fruits. That's happening all the time. You can really grow a lot of food on a small amount of land. So we can easily feed everyone on a fraction of the land and allow the rest of the world to be. Thanks, sweetheart. You can stay maybe for questions if there are any, and we can allow the whole. Most of the earth, which is right now being enslaved to monocropped corn and soy and alfalfa, or being grazed and destroyed, to be habitat for free living animals, like it was for millions of years. And we can have 10 billion people, vegans living. We don't have to reduce the population and all that stuff. We can live, if we live in a conscious way with love and awareness, we can easily feed everyone. And so I think we should understand the tremendous possibilities that we have to live in harmony when we stop the domination of animals and then begin to respect nature and the sacred feminine and plants, and let them feed us. We don't need to have lab-grown meat and all this other stuff. Just eat whole, organic, plant-based foods. Everything should, of course, should be organic, veganic, without any animal inputs. And that's a wonderful thing. That it's called stock-free agriculture, but we don't use manure and all that stuff. You don't need to. You just let everything go back into the earth again, and we don't need to feed stuff to animals and then have it go through the animal. We don't have to imprison animals or exploit them in any way. We get just as much of or even more abundance without using animal inputs. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or that anyone has. So thank you, everyone, for your kind attention. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Will, and please feel free to continue as long as you want. If Madeleine has anything to say about plants, we'd love to hear from her too. We're not constrained at all.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Yes, and I will, of course, absolutely. This has been incredible. I mean, what you guys have created there and everything you have said is so resonant and beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us.
You're welcome. Yeah, I just wanted to mention one other thing, since I watched Isabella talk about trees and how she would listen to trees. And I think that's a really important part of this whole thing. It's kind of listening to the plants, to the trees, on that level. But also, I just want to share a brief story. Many years ago, when I was much younger, I think I was in my 20s. So way back, my old Zen teacher told me that when he was a young man, he had done this practice that people in India do, where they walk for 72 hours without stopping. And I thought, oh man, walk for 72 hours without stopping. That sounds so hard. But I kept thinking about it, and I thought, all right, I'm going to try that. So one day I started. Now, I lived in Oakland, California, in a little house. So I started walking in the backyard. I had a little backyard around a plum tree. It was in the backyard. And I started walking, and I just walked, and it's a very difficult practice. I remember after walking for 12 hours, I was pretty much exhausted, and I still had 60 hours to go. It was like, how am I ever going to do this? And then at night, it was so difficult because it was dark and I could hardly see my way around. But what happened was by the second day, and especially by the second night, my mind, I guess it was because it was sleep deprived or something. It was like the left brain just shut off. And I started to see this plum tree as it was, I think, alive. I mean, it was really alive. I was walking around this plum tree, and I remember looking up at this tree, and it was dancing, and it was alive, and it had a presence, and I was like in awe of this tree. and then as I walked, I can just never forget this experience of that. And then on the third day, as I was walking, the flowers, suddenly their colors just exploded, and they were such luminescent colors of the flowers. And by the third night, it was really like a whole nother world. And so I realized from that experience that in many ways, being born here in this society, our brains are really regimented in such a way that we just learn to see just the shallow surfaces of everything. And if there are ways to, through these practices of walking for 72 hours without sleeping, or through meditation, to see with another set of eyes and see the light, these trees. I've never forgotten that. I mean, I see trees even now. Somehow there's a being there. And we are taught in biology classes that they just, they're kind of these things that stand there, and the xylem and phloem and fluids flow and so forth. And that's true on one level. But I really feel that they are beings, there are consciousness, and that there is an expression of some kind that we can open up to on some level. So I want to just share that. Thank you. Thanks very much. So I'm happy to respond if there are any questions that anyone might have about any of this.
Absolutely. Please feel free, everybody, now to type your questions into the chat, or if you feel more comfortable asking. We definitely have some time for that now.
Well, I'm just going to talk, even though I said to use the chat because I'm not a very fast typist, so I'll be real quick. So can you say a little bit more about the foundational role of spirituality? That when you were talking, it really occurred to me, it's like a pruning, the experience of being in this material exploitive world is like a pruning of ourselves. I was thinking about the tree. You were talking about the expansiveness, and it just really, it was that whole feeling of that our own consciousness and our own that increased dimension, which is natural, which has been atrophied or pruned, is really really core to the revival of everything.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I hadn't thought of that before, but I like that. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. A pruning, because a lot of the ways that we would have grown just got nipped in the bud in many ways, just clipped right off by well-meaning people. I mean, that's the whole thing. I think for the most part, it happens. My parents and my teachers, my friends, neighbors, relatives, it happens to all of us. They've been wounded. The wounding kind of goes through the generations, and we experience it, and we get pruned, and we get trimmed down back to a little something, like we're little stalks. Just, I mean, really, in many ways, I think we're just a small potential of what we could be, really, if we hadn't been so aggressively pruned. And I think, of course, the difference is, and on one level, is that as human beings, I feel that we have tremendous capacities, even if whatever's happened to us, to awaken, to heal, to discover, to create, to question, and to co-create also together, and to encourage each other to do that. So I think the process, these books that I wrote go into it much more in depth, how the whole thing happens and so forth. But it's basically unavoidable. I mean, we're born into, it's like, I couldn't say to my family, well, I'm not going to speak English. I'm going to speak French. It's like, no, you're going to speak English because we all speak English. That's how it is. We're born into a culture, and we're like a little sponge, and we just soak up every little nuance of how we relate to trees and animals and each other and men and women and all this. And so at a certain point, we can, I think through meditation and inner exploration, we can begin to quiet our mind perhaps and realize to the degree to which we've been conditioned. And then if we quiet our mind more, we begin to realize we can attain a state of without conditioning or minimal conditioning. And then we don't have to believe anymore the official narratives, whatever they are. And so to me, it's the core thing is to take back authority. We've given away our authority. We trust the authorities. We trust outside authorities. And we trust the government. We trust the media. We trust the technocrats and the experts. It's a huge mistake. We trust the doctors. We need to come back and trust our own authority, connect with our own authority internally, and let that be our guide. And I think that when we have people doing that, we will have real freedom, but it means responsibility, being proactive and taking responsibility for our food, for our relationships, for the quality of our consciousness, everything, and for our health, really for our health. That's why I say I haven't been to a drugstore to get any medication since in 50 years. I don't use it because I think these toxic chemicals are not going to help. And I think it's important to find a way of harmony within oneself, and then to live that as best we can, and to take risks. Try it out, try things out, because we're only here for a few decades, and so why come here and just go along in the parade like everybody else? I mean, we're here to understand and explore, and it's a very wonderful adventure, a human life. It's a fantastic opportunity. So don't let yourself get if you've been pruned, grow even more. I think that's really the lesson that the trees give us. You prune them, they grow even more. So thanks. Anyone else have something? Go ahead, Olivia.
Thank you for your question, Gay, and thank you so much. Well, we do have a few other questions.
Okay.
Isabel also responded to your comment. She said, "Thank you for your kind comments on my talk. I felt very vulnerable afterwards. I think we have the nature consciousness in our shadow, but we repress it."
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the shadow is what we are, but we repress, and that's a very good point. So it was really great to hear how you were able to get these wisdom teachings in a way through the mediumship of the trees and let them be a catalyst for that wisdom to come through. So thanks for sharing that.
Beautiful. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Ayana is wondering, what if you don't live in California, mountains where very little grow, the Arctic and lots of other places, for example?
Yeah, don't live there. No, I mean, it's so funny. It's like you have, I mean, like in Switzerland or in Europe in general, all these people are living way high up in the mountains, and so they have to have cows. You can't survive up there without cows. It's so cold, and everything, and harsh. And you come here to the United States, nobody lives up there. Those are national parks. You just let it be a national park. Go up there and mountain climb. But if you're living, if you're born there, I guess, if there are some people that like Eskimos or the people who live in very harsh climates, and I would say they live if they really feel like they're supposed to live there, then I have nothing against it. But the vast majority of us live in places where we can actually grow food and live that way.
Excellent. And Mary had a similar question. She says, "I live in Southern Oregon and our property is on the edge of a forest and filled with poison oak and manzanita. No water in the summer. I planted a small, dry, native wildflower field for the pollinators, etc. after pulling poison oak and manzanita. I hope to expand it over the years, but I can't imagine how to grow food on this dry soil."
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very dry here, too. I mean, we do irrigate. We have systems that are set up, drip systems that are set up and go all around. And so I think you can grow. I mean, there's water. I mean, there's a lot to learn, I think, about managing things properly. And but I think it's good to, find places where we can live in harmony with nature and grow our own food. It's not that difficult. I mean, people have been doing it. People have been living more, of course. I think we came originally probably from more in the tropical or subtropical regions. As soon as we get farther and farther away, you need more violence, right? I mean, you need to, like I noticed somebody here says, "You mean destroy cultures that have been there for thousands of years, the Inuit?" Yeah, it's basically, no, of course. I mean, if they want to continue that, but it takes a lot of violence to live in. You got to kill animals, and so it's that's one of the things, right? I mean, to be aware of. But I think in general, we can live in harmony on most of the Earth's surface. Where we are, there's even something called primary water. I'm not sure if you're aware of primary water, but there's quite a lot of research that there's water everywhere, even in desert regions. If you dig down far enough, that water actually comes out of the earth through hydrogen and oxygen being compressed together. It's not something that's actually limited the way we think it is. So there may be more to the desert regions, but again, maybe those desert regions, we shouldn't be trying to live there if we have to, kill so much.
Mhm. Excellent. Thank you. I think Deeksha is wondering, you've had such spiritual experience and attunement within self and around you. What called you to activism?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I can say it was just a personal thing. When I was a Zen monk in Korea, I loved it. I mean, it was a community where, I remember when I was younger, before that, I said, and kind of in a half jokingly, I said, I would like to be paid to meditate, right? I want people to pay me to meditate. I thought I was kind of dreaming, I was kind of joking. But when I was actually a Zen monk in Korea, I realized, well, I got my wish. Here I am. I'm getting paid to meditate. I really was. I could have stayed there for the next 60 years, meditating. And there are people that, in Korea, lay people support the monks. I mean, they do. They think it's a valuable thing to have a certain small percentage of the population just meditating all the time. It raises the consciousness of the whole culture, and that's a good thing. So people understand that and they support it. And these are the people who are the spiritual teachers, and they do funeral and other things, and so they're valued. And it was a tough decision. I really liked it. I loved meditating, but I decided to come back and get my PhD at Berkeley and teach college and get married. And now we've given, at this point, I kind of looked at it because I have kind of a record. We lived in an RV and we've given over 4,000 lectures all in over 50 countries and all 50 states many times, and we've just been out there giving, I think, probably given more lectures promoting veganism than any human being who ever lived. Probably not that it's anything to be proud of, but just that's what we've been doing. So it's been very much an active thing. So it's kind of like, in some ways, I feel like I spent these first, like my 20s, just sitting and not doing anything. And then after that, I was just like, okay, let's go. And just kind of going out there and being active, because I feel, I guess, that there's such an urgency for people to understand that our violence towards animals boomerangs right back on us, and we don't realize it. It just, we get heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease. We get violence and war and conflict and injustice. We need to realize that if we want peace and harmony and freedom for ourselves, we need to give it to those who are vulnerable in our hands. If we don't give it to them, what right do we have to have it for ourselves? This is such an important message, and I realize that there's really very few people actually articulating this message in the big picture, with the spiritual and cultural and anthropological and historical and medical perspectives all together, because that's what people need to understand. I think to really understand this, we need to understand the big picture. So I'm very happy. I'm active, but I think we need to come here. A human life is not simply to meditate. I mean, I know it's important, but we're here to be active. I mean, we're here to do something, I think. Yeah, we have a physical body, we have a vehicle, so to really be creative. And I'm so grateful. I would say the smartest thing I ever did besides going vegan was marrying Madeleine, because she's such a fantastic ally and focuses on creating beauty, which I think is really the way forward for us, is to just connect with the beauty within ourselves. Because the hallmark of animal agriculture is it's ugly. It's always ugly. It's always violence and misery and oppression and slavery, and it's just so ugly. We've been to slaughterhouses, we've been to stockyards, we've been to all these factory farms. I mean, it's just, there's nothing uglier and more horrific than animal agriculture. It's literally hell on earth. And to think that we actually eat that stuff and that we actually tolerate it, like they could be selling millions of animals every day by the pound and like they're sacks of cement. I mean, how is it possible that that this is still happening? It's really amazing. And that we talk like we really want justice and freedom and health, and we don't make that connection. It's like, come on. So I don't have a choice. I mean, I've got to do something. So that's a great question. Thank you.
If we have any other questions, we can go through them at this time. It looks like Yana shared a resource in the chats on dry farming. Thank you for that. And if anybody else has anything they'd like to add or ask before we wrap up.
Yeah. I'm unable to raise my hand, but I just want to say thank you so much, Will, for all your service and all your work. Thank you. I've been following you for years. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Thanks. Madeleine, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean.
Come on. Okay, Madeleine'd like to say a few words too.
Beautiful. Welcome, Madeleine.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, yeah. I went back and forth to the garden, so I'm pretty busy out there. The weather is beautiful and the cherries are coming slowly, and lots of greens. We eat every day, we eat fresh greens, and I can just suggest all of you and everybody on this planet to get their own garden. And one time I lived in Japan, and they don't have space a lot for gardens. So what they did, they had planters on the balcony and had cucumbers, tomatoes, and different herbs and eggplants. And what was climbing, they bound on the railing, and it was climbing, and it was full of cucumbers. I lived right opposite of it, so I was just a few yards away from them, and I could see how the Japanese woman came out and gathered the cucumbers and all kinds of things. It was so fun, such a learning curve for me to see without a piece of land, we can still grow food. And of course, we can also grow the sprouts. And we have YouTube videos, how to grow sprout. Will demonstrates it. And you can take some garden tours with us, and a lot more. So please go to our website and click on video, and then you can get inspired with garden tours and yoga and all kinds of things. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
That's beautiful, Madeleine. Thank you. I think we have a question for you if you have another second.
Yes.
It looks like Gay is wondering, how has your sense of self and consciousness changed over these past years with your increased intimacy with plants?
I started very early in my 20s with gardens. I couldn't wait till I got a piece of land, and I thought that's absolutely necessary to have a piece of land. And before that, I had lots of house plants and cactus and all kinds of things, a jungle in my house. But then I started, and what my deep within myself, what I feel, a garden without an apple tree is no garden. It has to have an apple tree. So that's what I planted first, and then the veggies and berries. And I have to say, like, a garden just makes my life more harmonious, because I go out there, and these are like friends out there. I can have maybe a task, a problem, or anything, and I go into the garden, and I feel some kind of support coming from there. So it's not just eating one's food, which is really wonderful, but also having a relationship, even if one is alone or or so, one can go out to the garden, and there are actually some beings out there, and they talk to you if you're quiet.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank
That's
you.
beautiful.
Yeah, we have actually in
Thank you so much.
this little area we have, which is only about a quarter of an acre, we have 76 fruit and nut trees. So it's really a lot. And besides all the vegetables and berries and herbs and all the other stuff, it's probably about 300 or 400 plants. So it's a pretty big operation for just one person, two people, you know.
Yeah, Will helps me doing the heavy stuff, and when I'm over the top, then he comes to rescue. So this, I have a good husband here.
Aw. Isabella actually commented that you both seem like such authentically lovely people, and eyes can't hide pure souls, they shine through. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Happy to answer any other final questions or comments or whatever anybody might have. I think,
it looks like we have more in the chat if you have a couple more minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, someone from Kerulos, I think Gay, probably asked, can you also talk about love with plants? That may have also been for Madeleine. I'm not sure, but love with plants.
Talk about love with plants. I guess you mean talk to plants about how much we love them. No, I think that's good. I mean, we say that. Like if there's a plant, if there's a tree or a plant that doesn't look too well, we don't say anything where she can hear us. Like, oh, she doesn't look. You don't look very good. You know, we don't say that. we say, wow, you're looking great this morning. And also, whenever in the morning. And actually in the evening too, when I play the piano and then Madeleine joins on the flute, we always have the window open so the plants can hear the music. Because I think there's been quite a bit of research showing that plants respond to positively to music, especially harmonious music. There was this guy in I think in somewhere in the Midwest back in, I think in the 60s, and he thought, this beautiful sound in the morning of all the birds, how they all have this morning song. Maybe that inspires the plants to grow. And so he thought, I'm going to try to find some music that has similar sounds to the birds. And he found classical music with pieces that he thought was similar, and he started playing it to his corn that he had growing. And all of his neighbors thought he was crazy having this music playing out to his cornfield. But he showed this picture of his corn. I mean, corn usually grows maybe 6 feet high. His was like over 10 feet high. It was just like spectacular cornfields. And all these other things, his vegetables, everything started growing much better than anyone else's. And so there's been quite a bit of showing that this harmonious music, the plants love that. They feed on it. They enjoy it. And I think that's true of our thoughts and our feelings as well. Like we're in harmony. We have a space of love. We're meditating. We're sending forth compassion for all beings. And I think the plants help us with that. They love it. They love it. I think they love it. I think, the universe is a manifestation of love. It is. It's a manifestation of love. We're here because of infinite divine love. And why not be manifestations of love ourselves and shed that love out? And one of the best ways is through a garden, because you create an environment where birds and insects, everybody, it's harmonious. Mm-hmm. And it feeds the whole networks of information in the soil, everything. So we can all do that. We can all create more love. That's what communities really are, I think. So.
Yeah.
Great question.
Beautiful. Isabella is wondering, do the more than human people share the food?
If more than two people? Yeah.
More than human.
More than human.
So
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's always other animals getting some. I mean, we share it with the local scrub jays, and sometimes the raccoons get in. And squirrels, we have different ways. We started feeding the squirrels also, so they have food because sometimes they take a lot of ours. But generally, the local animals get some.
Yeah, because there aren't so many gardens. So, if everybody would have a garden, then all the wildlife has enough to feed. But if you're kind of alone in a area with a garden, then one has to start protecting somehow. But like with the trees, we leave the upper third, we leave to the birds, and then the two lower. We always said a third to the wildlife, a third for Will, and a third for me.
Beautiful. Lovely. What a lovely community all around you.
Yeah.
It looks like the rest of our comments in the chats are comments. Mary shared a resource called The Secret Life of Plants, which substantiates the music that you were just talking about having the effect on plants. And Isabella recalled a similar book by the same man about soil. The author looks like Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird.
Right.
And Karen shared that she's very inspired by everything you've shared and your dedication to bringing love, beauty, and harmony to the world through your activism, compassion, and living such an awakened existence. I look forward to visiting your website and learning more about your work through your writings. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. There are more books coming out also if you're really interested in organic vegan agriculture. There's a book called Growing Green, which is written by some British authors. It's called Stock-Free Agriculture in England. There's also a big movement in Europe. They have another name for it. I forget what it is exactly, but it's like veganic. So it's just basically agriculture without any animal inputs, bone meal, blood meal, and they're finding that the yields are complementary or even greater than with using animal-based inputs, where you have to grow food, feed it to animals, and then put that on the land. I mean, it's a waste, really. You don't have to do that. So I think that's the wave of the future, is this kind of agriculture. It's much cleaner. There's less possibility for all kinds of pathogens that come from animals and so forth. So it's really great. I mean, we love it. It's a way to build the soil using plants and in harmony with nature. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. So inspiring. And I really enjoyed your talk. It's incredible. I've learned so much. I know everybody has. Oh, Gay?
I'm sorry, I just want to ask one question. I written down what, when you, Will and Madeleine, Will, you had mentioned earlier on about the language, vegan and plant and animal. Are there some ideas about different language that helps us move past these dualistic schisms and this, which at its nucleus is really, a product or produces conflict?
Right. Well, I think the language is a product of our society, which is an animal agriculture-based society based on humans dominating nature and animals. And so the language reflects that. And so when we try to talk about it, it's difficult, but I'd like to talk in terms of liberation a lot, like animal liberation or nature liberation, liberating the natural world from human exploitation, and how much more joyful and easy it would be for us to live if we did it that way. So I think, and also in terms of using words like harmony and peace, because I think it's really about having a peaceful or harmonious relationship with nature, with animals, with each other. And words like savor, to savor our relationships, just not have to get something from somebody, not have to, like we're not doing it to get something, we're doing it because we enjoy it, right? I mean, it's a side benefit that we have some apples and plums and pears and things, but the whole idea is to just grow these trees and create an environment that supports all life. We can do that, So I think it's very important to move away from this idea of I'm right and you're wrong. You know, the way I'm doing it is right. The way you're doing it is wrong. I'm going to try to changing other people and make them do it the way we do it. And instead, it's just more like, this is what I've discovered. You know, I figured this out. It's working great. I realized, for example, the only reason I was eating animal foods was I was just following orders. Really, that's the only reason anyone eats animal foods, is because we're following orders that were injected into us from infancy by well-meaning people. And I was being exploited. You know, I was exploiting animals and I was being exploited. And so now I'm not doing it anymore, and it's great. And then I discovered, so I think, you know, Gandhi talked about satyagraha, which literally means truth power or truth force. And it just means basically speaking our own truth, like saying, well, this is what I've discovered. And by moving away from eating animal foods, my life has become so much more healthy and happy. And now that we're growing our own food, that adds another dimension to it. And just, you know, say that, and then people can do what they want with it, right? I mean, we have the freedom to decide, oh, I'd like to look into that more, and then we can learn from each other, and then we can create communities that support us, each other in doing it. And I think that's the most powerful thing, is to actually create communities like you're doing with Kerulos Institute. You know, that whole idea of education and learning and looking into nature and learning from animals and learning from plants. We are nature. We are part of nature. And so the more we understand that and get away from these divisive concepts that make one right and one wrong, and judging and blaming and shaming and criticizing, and that just ends to fighting, and people dig in their heels even harder. And, you know, so I think it's important to just speak our own truth and let people respond however they want for the short time we're on this earth. You know, just do our best. Yeah, thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Will, for sharing all your time with us today. It's been incredible and so inspiring.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Gay. Thank you, everyone with Kerulos. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And you can go to worldpeacediet.com if you want to find out more about all this. And thanks again. We look forward to staying in touch.
Excellent. Absolutely. Thank
right.
you so much. And for everybody here, our next and final speaker in this series will be a week from today on Friday, May 31st, back at our usual time of 10 a.m. Pacific time. And we will be joined by our very own Gabe Bradshaw, who will be sharing with us what moose and wolves teach us about plant liberation. So if you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Kerulos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website, kerulos.org. Once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Will, for joining us today. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks. Great.
Thank you. Bye.